Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, I cannot wait to make this video. We are going to be comparing two legendary amplifier circuits from two iconic British manufacturers, and they are on the floor over my shoulder there. Now I say British manufacturers, one of those amp heads is a clone made in America, but we'll get onto that in a second. So the first amp we're going to be taking a look at is the UK made Orange Custom Shop Retro 50. Now this is a slightly more modern model. This one dates from 2008. And it's essentially the Pics Only circuit from the early 70s, only at a slightly lower wattage. So unlike the modern Orange sound, the high gain metal stuff, the Jim Root signature head and the tiny terror and things, this amp is a classic rocker. It's that clanky, legendary sound that people like Jimmy Page made so famous back in the early 70s. And we're going to be putting that alongside my Vajra JTM45 clone. Now, of course, the JTM45 is the first circuit put out by Jim Marshall in the early 60s, very heavily borrowed, shall we say, from the Fender Bassman, but with a sort of more British voice to it. Now, both of these amps are hand-wired. The JTM45 is wired on the turret board. The Orange is hand-wired on like a terminal strip. Just different ways of doing things, neither's better or worse than the other, but the component choices are what matter. And both of these amp heads use the most absolute premium components out there. So the JTM45 uses Sozo vintage reissue capacitors and paper-wound Hayboa transformers and things. The Orange is very much the same, and they even developed their own output transformer for the Retro 50. So in the old big book of Orange here, they talk about advanced transformer designs, and they say it was while we were designing the Retro 50 that we started taking transformers apart to see what made the good ones so effective. We wanted something that sounded like the original Pics Only Woden transformer. Now what they ended up with was about twice the price of their standard transformers, but as they say here, Cliff Cooper had no hesitation in approving the additional cost because they sounded so much better. So in terms of components and how they're put together, both of these amps are just premium boutique hand-wired point-to-point quality. Now, in putting this video together, I have kind of two ways of doing this. The first would be to put both those heads into the same cabinet and compare the fundamental sounds and the differences between those two circuits. But that's not really what this video is all about, because the circuit is only one piece of the puzzle, and the speakers those circuits are most synonymous with are absolutely part of those legendary tones that we know and love. So I've got two cabinets today, and in both of them I've put the speakers most closely associated with those classic circuits. So for the JTM45, in the very early days of the sort of the coffin logos and the offset sort of panels and things, they used Celestian silver alnicos. And then when the kind of medium magnet ceramic speakers came out in the late 60s, they switched to using the G12M in most of their cabinets. So I've kind of gone for the middle ground. I've got the Celestian Heritage G12M reissue in there, which is made to the original specifications of the really vintage G12Ms. And for the alnico sound, I've got the Scumbag S75 PVC, which is kind of a clone of a silver alnico with a little bit of Celestian blue mixed in. So it's definitely voiced for an amplifier such as a JTM45. Now for Orange amps, they were more closely associated with heavy magnet ceramic speakers. So the Celestian that they're most known for using was the G12H75, the one with the lead cone. So I've got one of the Heritage reissues in my Zilla Fatboy. And alongside that, they were known for two other speaker manufacturers. The first was Eminence, and that was largely because Orange used to ship empty cabinets to the States, where they were loaded with American-made speakers and put on the market. So in the US, Orange were quite well known for using Eminence speakers, but here in the UK, they were very closely tied with Fane. Now, I'm a huge fan of Fane speakers, so alongside the G12H, I've put a Fane F70 to cover that camp as well. So, as I said, I think the speaker choices are a very important part of looking into these two iconic amps and the tones they are known for. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to set the amps at various levels of gain just by cranking them up, because of course the JTM45 is a non-master volume amp, so I'm just going to turn it up really loud. The Orange does have a master volume, but I'm going to leave that wide open so it's not doing anything at all. So I'm going to set the gain, and then I'm going to EQ both of the amps to sound as good as I think I can get them to sound with each guitar that I'm using. So it's very, very subjective on my part. You might EQ these amps very differently, and I'm not trying to make one sound like the other. I'm just trying to get the best out of these amps, and so we can look at the sort of similarities and differences between them. So there's a lot of subjectivity involved in speaker choice and how I EQ them and how they're all set and mic'd up and things. But hopefully this should be an interesting video to see what the fundamental differences are between legendary Marshall tone and legendary Orange tone. So without further ado, folks, let's make a hell of a lot of noise. So there we are, folks. Now please do comment underneath, let me know what you were hearing today, which of the amps was your favourite with which guitar. I love chatting nerdy guitar stuff with you folks in the comment sections. Now, really interesting, right? And as I said at the start of the video, how I set the amps and the speakers I used and how I mic them up is all very subjective. So we're not comparing apples with apples here. We're going after the kind of the best those amps can sound in each of those situations and comparing them. We're not trying to make them sound the same. But I think they are both very British voiced, aren't they? As we know, they have that sort of classic British sort of MIDI sound. Both are very thick sounding amplifiers, especially the JTM45, and if you looked at the graphics I put on screen, you'll have seen that, as is kind of the way when dialing in a JTM45, the bass was at like 9 o'clock and below, almost off for most of it, because being based on the Fender Bassman, a bass amp, it is super, super thick. The orange was more kind of straight up the middle at sort of 12 o'clock. But the biggest difference between them, as I'm sure you heard, for me, is the mid-range. Now, the Marshall mid-range is more sort of closely associated with upper mids, that kind of sizzle around sort of 1 to 2, 3K, and it definitely has more bite up there. Whereas the orange is more kind of thick and soupy and boxy in the lower mids. Now, that's just a difference. It doesn't mean one's better or worse than the other. It's just a sort of fundamentally different part of the sound of those two amplifier manufacturers. And for me, the one I preferred really depended on what guitar I was using. So I felt that the two thin line guitars, the Heritage 535 and the 330, were more suited to the Marshall because it didn't have that kind of boxy low mid-range there, which those two guitars have in abundance. And because they're slightly softer in their attack, the sort of sizzle in the upper mid-range of the Marshall really helped them kind of jump out of the speakers. But with the Strat, the thick lower mid-range of the orange was sounding absolutely phenomenal. And it was almost like what people use tube screamers for, to kind of fatten out the low mid-range and roll off some highs. The orange, I thought, really suited the Strat with a good amount of gain on it. But as I said, neither's better or worse than the other. They are just slightly different beasts, but both sound absolutely phenomenal. Now, you might notice that I've titled this video on YouTube Part 1 because I've decided to do a Part 2 running both of those amps together at the same time, and I think that is going to be a hell of a lot of fun to put together, and I can't wait to do it. Probably I'm going to look forward to shooting that video a lot more than my neighbours are, but that's something I'm going to put together in a few weeks, so definitely watch out for that one. But as I said, folks, please do comment underneath, let me know your thoughts and opinions and everything. Which guitar and amp combinations were you preferring today? I love hearing from you folks in the comment sections. But for now, thank you ever so much for watching, folks. Please do hit subscribe. I know I always say it, but it does make a huge difference when you do that. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.